Welcome to Resiliency Within. I'm your host, Elaine Miller-Karras, and I just want to remind us that we're sponsored by the nonprofit I founded, the Trauma Resource Institute. You can go to their website to learn more about them. But today, I am honored to welcome back Kelly Cervantes. We had such a wonderful time last week. We decided to do it again, and she's the author of The Luckiest, and we'll talk more about her book in just a little bit. But I also want to welcome her husband, Miguel Cervantes, and he's the acclaimed Broadway star of Hamilton. And they are with me today to share their extraordinary journey through the unimaginable loss and their enduring love. They've agreed to open their hearts as they reflect on the life and death of their beloved daughter, Adelaide, who lived with epilepsy and a rare neurodegenerative brain condition. As Adelaide's terminal diagnosis unfolded, Kelly was a full-time caregiver, and I'd say very strong advocate, Kelly, for your daughter and your family, and also mother to your older son, Jackson. And while Miguel balanced the demands of the stage with the journey of Adelaide's illness unfolding at home. So with that, I want to just welcome you both and say, as we get started, what's on your mind today? I always ask that question first before we get into some of our questions. So Kelly, I'll start with you.
Well, actually, super exciting is that yesterday the Luckiest hit the USA Today bestseller list, which
Oh my
was
God,
so surprising.
congratulations. Oh my
Thank
gosh.
you.
Oh, that
I'm
is
still sort of
lovely.
basking in that excitement. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you.
Well, and let's see where Miguel is right now. So,
Listen, I sort of live my life in every single day that sort of is the most important day. You know what I mean? I don't really plan too far ahead and I don't think too far behind. So I am kind of living in the proud husband world of watching lots of years and lots of time of my wife sequestered in a small room with a computer. Um, and I think uh, to be able to share that with her is the most important part of this day, and for the last yesterday too. So that's where I'm at too.
well, anyway, welcome you both. And I wanted to also start because last week when Kelly and I were talking, we talked about, how you two met. And I always like to get both the husband and the wife's perspective on this. And she told me that you were a good dancer. That was one of the things that attracted her to you. And she wasn't so certain in the beginning, but there must have been some charming thing about you, Miguel, that captured her. But I'm just wondering about, so what was that like for you? You saw this beautiful young woman, and so what was going through your mind?
I was a young, actor running around New York City, and in that sort of lifestyle, you're always surrounded by new people and new experiences and new, faces, and the buddy of mine who was in a show, we were in a little workshop show, sort of flashed her headshot because back in the old days we were used to walk around New York City with pictures in our bags to just in case a casting director would walk by, and discover you on the street.
Yes.
So he showed me this picture, and I said, "Wow, that's a good-looking gal right there." And the sort of timeline moved a little bit forward, and we found ourselves in the same place through it was pure coincidence. uh, which is code for not coincidence at all. Uh,
Serendipity, as I call it. Serendipity. Yes.
Serendipity, also known as manufactured by my friend,
So
to
he
bring
knew,
us.
he knew
Yeah.
the two of
Oh,
you
I don't
would
know. I think he was
must
just
have.
sort of he was in the world. I think he had done this before to other friend groups of their that heard that after the fact that I heard that he was like sort of this little matchmaker presence in their group, but he sort of manufactured this meeting one night, um, and we ended up on the dance floor, and she's dressed up to go to a club, and I'm kind of dressed like I was going to sit at home and watch football on the couch, and
And she likes you anyway.
I guess we sort of hit it off on the dance floor, and I back in my younger days I was no slouch on the dance floor of any kind. So um in uninhibited uninhibited, yeah, that's right, on a dance floor to sort of just do whatever. And when a pretty girl dances with you, you don't back away. So that's how it started. And then, I uh, sort of, uh, I think the word would be I sort of mangled the next few days, and then we found our way back to a first date.
I don't think I shared that part with you, Elaine, where
No,
actually
no. What
he
was
had a
that?
girlfriend.
What? He had a girlfriend?
He had a girlfriend that he neglected to tell me about at the beginning. Yes.
Oh, Miguel, naughty boy.
Well, listen, a girlfriend is like a very sort of strong term, I think, for,
Oh,
like listen, back in our day, right? We used to go steady, right? We were going steady. This gal and I, we had started going steady.
okay. We can use that term.
We
That's a
we we had
different
gone
girlfriend.
steady but just very
Oh my
recently over the
gosh.
over the holidays. We met, I think, in January or early late December. Um, then this specific evening was, I think, early January. And earlier, late December, my this friend of mine, and we were like, yeah, we can sort of be a thing. And then we had our evening on the dance floor, and I said, oh yeah, that's not the thing. This may be a thing. And
You
that's
just
sort of
kind
how
of
it
knew.
started.
Isn't that interesting how you just kind of knew? That's
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I didn't, and I told her, I said, look, I don't want you to think that I'm going to go have this conversation with this other person because of you or for you. But I said,
oh,
because of you, I think I need to have a conversation, and then we can kind of see. So really bungled it, really made a mess of that first week. And then
Yeah.
I managed to do all right.
I
Yeah.
so
Semantics as far as I'm concerned.
so and so you decided, well, okay, maybe I'll just go and give him a try.
I told him that he could take me out to dinner as long as he was single and I would give him another chance.
Well, I love the fact that she had boundaries from the very beginning. Very good, Kelly. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But then, I also see that, Kelly and I were talking a little bit before the show started, because I said, she's a pretty organized person. And did you see that organization and like, okay, she has like a certain way of kind of managing the world? I mean, I can't imagine that all of a sudden came in the later part of your life, Kelly. I imagine you had at the beginning. Yes.
Um, no, I mean, maybe I don't. I think it was more the um the fact that it was so different than me.
Uh,
I think it was.
yes,
I wasn't sure what exactly. I don't think I could tell you that's what it was, or I can say, oh, it was because of this. But I
yes.
knew that my sort of frenetic kind of day by day energy was not the same way that she operated.
Uh-huh.
And as there may be friction there sometimes, I think the complementary,
Of each other.
yeah, the complement of those two styles, work well together. Not without its, pitfalls there, but I
Yes.
think in general, I knew that there was sort of um, a sort of a dance that we could do by the way that I lived my life and the way that she did, and that she, for the most part, asterisk parentheses, for the most part, didn't wasn't sort of negatively affected by my kind of you know uh the bounce around style.
Like
And
like
I
spur
sort
of the
of
moment. Could I say that was like spur of the
for
moment kind of
spur of the
person?
Yes,
moment, yeah.
100%.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's a day by day life, and I never, and I wasn't sort of um put off by the fact that it was like, hey, do you have a plan for, we need to have a plan for this? And I was like, why? But and those kinds of two things, I think, can
So
live at the same time.
you complemented one another, it sounds like,
Yeah,
from what you're
yeah.
saying. Yeah. Well,
I think
this
I needed someone to ground me in the present, and he
uh-huh.
needed someone to structure his life.
And so it worked,
It
obviously,
worked.
20 years later. And so this may be a good segue, because you have been through a lot together. You've been through such joyous things. I mean, you shared, Kelly, the joy of, when you got the Hamilton part. And but at the same time, you were learning that Adelaide was facing a very difficult situation in terms of her health. So, we started talking, Miguel, at the end of the show, saying, we talked about how she and you both managed, parenting Jackson, and of course the adoption of Anissa. And did I say that right? And is it Anissa? Anissa?
Anessa.
Anessa. And then, but how did you manage to keep your marriage together? Probably thinking there might have been some ups and downs through the whole thing between the two of you. But I think for families that are facing the chronic illness of a child, and of course the very tragic death of Adelaide, that your wisdom of what you've learned through the journey, I think could really be helpful to others. So I'm just going to ask whichever one of you wants to go first to just your reflections and your sharing. So Kelly, do you want
Um,
to go?
yeah, I think in answering this question, I sort of see it as like there's three or four different phases that I think that our marriage went through during these last 10 traumatic years or so. In that first phase was, when we had this major role reversal where I went from the primary breadwinner to Miguel being that, he was home more to I was home more. And there was a big transition there that spurred a lot of resentment in me as we had to rebalance the responsibilities, the home life responsibilities. And then um and we can sort of go back and talk about that, but then sort of the next phase was then just sort of figuring out how to live that life then and maintain that balance and keep those communication lines open. And then all of that was sort of flipped on its head when Adelaide passed away.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with all of these extreme emotions. And this should shock absolutely no one, given what we've just explained about how Miguel lives in the present and I'm living in the future, that we grieved wildly differently.
Yes.
And then and so I think that there's these different phases that we've sort of had to um, reassess and refigure out how to support one another and how to be married to one another successfully um and still have our needs met, but um still love each other through that. And there's those three pressure points in particular were difficult. I mean, it wasn't easy by any means.
Well, so I mean, I've heard from so many couples about the differences in how people grieve. And sometimes that really brings people apart because there's a lot of misconceptions about seeing someone, well, how come you're not crying? Or how come you're crying all the time? Going back and forth. And sometimes making really misjudgments about the other's grief. Just wondering if you both could maybe talk a little bit more about that. Maybe if you want to weigh in, Miguel, about that aspect of the journey.
Yeah, I like to, I sort of live in the place in these kinds of discussions about not really feeling like I know anything. Like we had this life and we had this experience, and I would never, ever pretend. And I think both of us live in this place of we can't pretend to know what would be work for you. I can't tell you that what we did and how we did it is going to work on your end. I was Hamilton for a very long time, and we were taken care of financially. We had this sort of support system, financial support, and sometimes people have that and sometimes they don't. She didn't have to work. I was gone every night. Like our search specific situation is very specific. So all I can say is that um in terms of what what I felt and what I went through, and I never I never expected anything from her. Like I never said, this is what you're supposed to be doing and this is what I need for you to do, or I was always kind of allowing myself to be in my lane at the same time allowing her, not knowing that that's what I was supposed to do or whether or not that was right. I didn't know. I was just saying, well, if you're doing that, then I'm going to do this. And hopefully, this is okay, you know, but, and this is sort of, and look, there's the in the grief part, in the loss part, that's where we were. That's where we lived. That's how we operated on one day to the next. She had days where she couldn't, and so I did. You know what I mean? And there were days that she was there and she was more available, and so that's how we lived. And never once, not that it wasn't difficult, and not that there weren't times that I said, "Well, why can't you be here?" or "What's going on?" or "How do we fix this?" or how, sort of in an internal way, but really allowing, like, I can't dictate what you're supposed to be doing, and then, um, when our energies finally crossed, and it was kind of like, I don't know if you told this story already, but
Mm.
um, there was we'd moved back from Chicago when we were in the new house here. Was it here? It's here.
Hmm.
It's here. And I was fixing a bathroom. We were upstairs, and it had been is now a year and a half or however long it was. Maybe not even that long. And I'm upstairs, like putting tile in the shower, during, and I'm in there, and I walked down the next day or whatever it was the next, and I saw, and I said something like, I was just grouting tile. And I said, and I started crying because I started thinking about randomly about that, Adelaide will never be in this house and will never see this place. And this is like a life that exists after her. And I was like kind of weirdly blubbering over the, grout mixture. And she said something like, well, why don't you ever say stuff like that more? Because I would be nice to know that you have these moments, because her, grief beast would come out any time of the day, in broad daylight in public, where I would sort of be out walking the dog and picking up poop, and kind of have my moments those times, and these sort of weird private moments. And the moral of the story is like, you don't have to do it together, but just make sure that you're doing it. Like, that there's a shared experience, even if it's not physically shared. And I think that is something that may be useful to someone else, maybe not. I can't say that that is,
Well,
uh,
it really sounds like you gave space
yeah,
for whatever was going to evolve, that it would evolve. So you didn't put an expectation on it had to be a certain way. Would
And
that be?
that was its own gift that I don't think I registered at the time, because at the time I just felt very lonely. I never saw him crying. So I felt like I was the only one grieving this loss in our house at the time. But so I appreciated so much when he would tell me that he had had a moment, because, even though we weren't sharing that moment together, it was still, I knew that I wasn't the only one grieving in the house. But even more than that, Miguel never rushed my grief. He never judged me when I was, we'd be at a children's birthday party and I was like, nope, we have to go. We have to go right now. I can't do this anymore. We need to leave. And he was like, okay, all right, let's go. Like, there was never any judgment as I went through my own process. And that was such an incredible gift. But I also think that we learned an important lesson in that, um, Miguel uh, is not, say this as kindly as possible, he's not the best at like sitting in the dark with me. Like, when I am in that dark space and I am cuddled up in bed, he is not the person who's going to like crawl in next to me and hold me. And I knew that as Adelaide's 1 year anniversary of her passing was coming up, that was going to be something that I wanted and something I needed. And I am really proud of myself for doing this, but I called my best friend from Chicago,
Hmm.
who I knew was capable of that.
Uh,
She would be grieving Adelaide too, and and so she flew out and was with us, and we laid in bed and watched, um, you know, sitcoms and laughed and then cried, and then she would get me to laugh again, and I it was what I needed. And instead of setting Miguel up to be disappointed in for him not being able to be there for me in that way, and also acknowledging that he was still grieving too. It's not, he's a grieving father. It's not his responsibility to completely comfort me at all times. And I like to use the metaphor that, if the sink is broken and your partner can't fix it, you don't get mad at them, you call a plumber. And so sometimes you have to outsource certain parts of your emotional needs. And I think that our current society puts a lot of pressure on our significant others to be the end all be all for us, to be our best friend as well as our spouse, as well as our romantic partner. And I can't be everything that he needs, nor can he be everything that I need. So instead of getting upset with them for not being able to meet certain needs, I think we have to look outside of our romantic life and find friends who can meet those needs and not be so dependent on our spouse.
Well, I just want to underscore what you both have just shared because I think there's a wisdom in that you can't meet each other's needs 100% of the time. And you knew all the gifts that he has that he gives to you and also the limitations that happen in any relationship. And when you called your friend and she came out, you knew that she could give you something that you needed that he couldn't. So
Yeah.
I'm just, checking in with Miguel. So what was that like for you to know that? I mean, it sounds like you have the space for that in what you
I,
shared about yourself.
yeah, I operate in that space of like, I don't need that. I don't actually want that. Like I would prefer to go out and rake the leaves and spend time outside by myself and just sort of, you know, let these things happen if I cry. And I've spent numerous hours, moving grass from one side or dirt from one side of the yard to the other in tears. You know what I mean? And that to me feels like uh what I want. That's what I want, to have these solitary moments. And for her to be in a totally different world, um, I what I learned is that, you know, those types of things are okay. But what I wasn't good at is saying, hey, this is what I want. What do you need? What is it that you need? We never really talked about it. It was kind of happened, and it was kind of and there was a uh we were sitting in a therapist office once, and she was talking about it, and she kind of got upset, and I was like, yeah, that seems like something to be upset about. And the therapist was like, hey, do you ever touch your wife? Do you ever comfort her? And I was like, I mean, yeah, I could if she wanted it, you know what I mean? And that was like, I was like, oh, well, maybe we should figure out if that's what you need. Maybe I could do that. And so that it becomes like a, hey, I'm here. Like if this is what you need, I can I can be here for that. But it didn't register because that's not what I want. That's not
I
how,
get
and I don't, and I was always like, I don't want to put this on you. I don't need to drag you in here with me, but that's what I need. Not to say I don't want to get in there with you, but it was like, I never asked because I was like, oh, we're cool, right? We're like, I'm doing this. I don't want to burden you. You don't want to burden me. Like we're good, but we are not the same person.
Well,
So
since after you had that exchange with the therapist, did you start asking her what you
yeah,
needed?
yeah, I think I engaged enough to know that I was there and enough to say, hey, this is okay, and I think understanding that those things were that those things were existed, like these two sort of worlds existed at the same time. And to say like I can engage as much as I can and as much as I've to make sure that you're okay and to make sure that um and in any situation that I could be here if you really needed me, and not that I'm going to abandon or run away.
Yes.
Um,
So, our folks are listening to this podcast and if they could see Kelly had a very big smile when you were talking about the exchange with the therapist. And I'm just wondering, Kelly, if you'd like to say something about what that was like when he started like asking about, well, I don't need this, but I know that you do. So I'm going to ask you now.
Yeah, no, I mean it was this it, I think it just goes to show how important communication is in a marriage and explaining what our needs are you know the huge difference now is that if I have a moment and I'm like I need to go lay down or he will come to me and give me a hug because he knows that that physical connection, that feeling like I'm not alone is something that I need in those moments. And so, the interesting thing is it's been 6 years since Adelaide died, and I think we've almost moved into this other space where we do have this understanding of what the other person needs. And that's not to say that should our needs change in the future that we wouldn't have to um, go back and figure that all out again. But I feel like now we've gotten to a nice rhythm and understanding. But it did take us going to a marriage counselor to really sort of hash that out and have someone ask us those questions and sort of be the mediator in that scenario.
Well, and I guess I just, want to say to our listeners that sometimes getting some help from the outside can also be a very helpful process that can help with better communication. So thank you for sharing that. But I also wanted to say one more thing too, and I appreciate it's because I've heard from so many people over the years how some people like their grieving is more private. It's quieter. It's in more solitude, as you were sharing, Miguel. And but I also want to say something about, and maybe we can address this after our break. But it can be hard for men to cry because lots of times in different societies we're told, well, buck it up, fella. Men don't cry. She can cry, but I'm not going to cry. And the fact that you're sharing with us that you had tears, and I think that's just so important that we acknowledge that everyone has tears, and it's okay for men to cry. I don't know if you want to say something about it
No,
right now.
I hope that this is not this is PG-13. That's bullshit.
Yeah, that's
Like
right.
the more crying, the better. I'm the biggest baby in this house. And I think that I want to teach my son that I said, listen, you don't cry when I tell you to pick up your room or do your homework. That's not a good reason to cry. Anything else on the table, let her rip.
Brian is out there. That's good. Well, I'm a little student of neuroscience, and because so many people have told me this over the years, and I said, the research says that when we cry, we are actually releasing endorphins in our body, and it's actually helping us. So I always say that to every man that I know who tells me that they shouldn't cry. So thank you for saying that not crying is bullshit because I totally. Well, we're going to take a short break and we'll hear from our sponsor, the Trauma Resource Institute, and we'll be back to the second part of our conversation with Kelly and Miguel Cervantes. Welcome back to Resiliency Within. I'm here with Kelly and Miguel Cervantes. We're talking about their journey and their relationship and their children, their beloved daughter Adelaide, who passed 6 years ago, and the journey that they had in parenting her. And we're gonna go back a little bit and talk about the parenting part. So I know, Kelly, when we talked last week, is that during the time that Miguel was getting one of the greatest, can I say gifts of your life, getting the role of Hamilton, is when you were also learning about her illness and what was happening to her. So you were parenting two children, one being very sick and medically fragile, And I can see from both of you how much your role as mother and father is one of the most important roles of your lives. So let's talk about that. So Kelly, do you want to start?
Yeah, it was, I sort of hinted before that I had a really difficult time with that transition personally, going from being the breadwinner to the home care provider. Um, that was tough for me. Miguel and I had always really shared a lot of the parenting and home responsibilities, even when he was in a show. And so it was a bit of a shock to my system. Um, this show was entirely different. Instead of being in the ensemble, he was the lead. And, he's on stage, 80% of the show. And there's all of this pressure that comes with that, in addition to all of the press responsibilities. And, he was taking care of his body and taking care of his voice. And meanwhile, Adelaide really required 24/7 attention and care. Her medications were constantly changing. And I remember getting um, really upset with him once because I had gone out to run errands or just get out of the house for a moment. And he was home and hadn't given Adelaide her afternoon medication that she was supposed to take. And I was so mad at him for not giving this medication. And how could he not remember? And how could he not know? Um, and it was a brutal fight, but it was one where I had to suck up and kind of realize that this was my role. And when I leave the house, no one knew Adelaide's care the way I did. So in order for me to hand her over to someone else, there really had to be this written um, schedule and updated medications and all of these things. And um, that wasn't his focus. And it was, I think, hard for him to not be in the thick of it with me. And I know that he experienced a lot of guilt around that, which I'll let him talk about. But um, I mean, it took me about a year to really come to grips. I think we spoke about that a little bit last time about, you know, accepting my role as this primary caregiver slash nurse slash therapist slash pharmacist, and finding joy in it. And um we eventually found that balance. But it meant that I needed to have that list on the fridge, that there needed to be very explicit instructions as to how Adelaide was taken care of, so that I could leave the home, so he could take care of his daughter. But he wasn't going to be able to memorize and stay up to date on the medications that were changing weekly. Um, that wasn't fair to ask of him, on top of everything else that he was also juggling around in his head.
So it sounds like, Kelly, that you had to really kind of realize your role. I mean, that whole identity also, we talked about that last time, the identity shift, that you were the primary, even
Yeah,
though you were in the partnership with this. And to expect for him to know everything if it wasn't written down, how would he automatically know that if you hadn't communicated that to him? Because there
yeah,
can be that, unwritten thing between husband and wife, right? Oh, well, he should just know.
yeah.
But yeah, at least
I definitely felt, I was like, well, she is your daughter. Why don't you know this?
yes.
And he's like, I can't. He's like, I can't keep up. And I was really angry for a really long, like that was a really hard moment. And it took me a while to get over it, to forgive him, and to sort of find a balance in there. And um, yeah, that it was not those first few months in Chicago, balancing all of that. That was
Not easy.
not easy.
Okay, so Miguel, I know you have something to say. I can.
Well, I think it's the conversation gets really murky when you start thinking about a mom and a dad and the roles of a mom and a dad, and you got to give the kids a bath, and you got to get them to school, and you got to get them to practice, and you got to do this, and you got to make sure their clothes are clean, and da 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 da. That is a mom and dad role, and everyone shares that responsibility. And those are the, you love your kids and you discipline your kids, and that's just what you figure that part out, right? Who does what, who does, but everybody does everything. That's sort of how you roll, right? Um, but with Adelaide, right, there was this, we did that, there was that stuff, and then Jackson was there, but then there was this whole other life. There
Yeah.
was this whole other, bucket, a laundry bin, a dump truck worth of responsibilities that she had that were not those types of typical parental responsibilities. And there was these two like fighting energies inside of me, right? Because I am her father, and I wasn't the one at all these doctor's appointments. I couldn't go all the time. She did all these therapies. She would take her. She knew the doctor's names and the nurses' names and all of these people and all of this information. And listen, we'll go back to when we were in New York before I got the job, and she's going to work every day, and I'm like, oh, we're going to go to these appointments. Something's not quite right. I'm going to go to they want to go to genetics doctor, or just geneticist, and talk to him. And so we go in there, and I'm talking to this guy, and he's giving me all his information and handing me these papers. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I'll, try not to think that. And I get home, and she's like, well, where are those papers? I said, I don't know, over there somewhere. And she said, well, what did he say? And I was like, well, I think he said, he was saying something about like, like a test for something. She said, what? And I said, well, it's like, I don't know. It's like three or four papers over there underneath the, she said, are you, and so then the binder,
Your
the,
different
so,
styles are being
oh my,
very
it was
clear right
crazy. And I
now,
said,
right?
okay, so this is not my strength. This is not where I'm going to find my success. And I think I had really gotten the job already by then. I think we were sort of in the transition period before I was going to start rehearsals and stuff. So as she was winding down, then the binder came about, and all the thing, and the organization. So fast forward to now we're in Chicago. Now we're these new doctors and all of this stuff. And I'm going to the theater every day, and I've got this show, and I've got these appearances, and I've got these things. But during the day, I'm home, and she's doing this, and the syringes, and the thing, and the squish, and the did, and the bag, and the list, and the thing, and then all of these pills. And I was like, I I can't even wrap my head around all of these things. And so in my brain, in my sort of quiet to myself brain, I would never ask her to go to the theater and do my job, right? I don't think she could go over there and perform Hamilton. I as well could not undertake the Herculean job that she was asked to do beyond mother. You know what I mean? I think that was a um, guilt, a guilty boulder on my shoulders, but I knew that I
You
wasn't.
could have if you'd had
I,
to. You
I
wouldn't
mean,
have
yeah,
done it as well as
I
I
wouldn't
did.
have. I wouldn't have been as good at it.
She wouldn't have done
Listen,
as well. But and I want to just say that I think it's important that you have this very public, very incredible role, but this could be any father who has a job
yeah,
that pulls him away from the home. And I think the word Herculean is a very important word to kind of
yeah.
underscore because it is that, Kelly. And I think that was almost what I think I heard you say in a different way about that first year of kind of understanding that because you didn't always understand that.
Mm-mm.
You
Well,
didn't
and
always understand that.
I think my fault here was that I didn't I don't think that, or maybe I don't know if that I did something wrong, but that understanding that, you know, I uh, we appreciated, like, not every family, what if she had a job? What if she had had a job as
Yeah,
well? And I had some, and she had this other
circle.
job that she had to go do. And then there's the tension of who's supposed to do what, because we're both busy and we're both there, but she couldn't. I call it at the time, you can't call it this, but it was a gift. It was an unbelievable gift that one of her parents could be home and be the sole like champion for this little
It was
girl.
a privilege. It was really
Yeah, and not everybody
Mhm.
has that, and I think for that reason, people, give us credit for staying together and having and being able to navigate. And I said, well, God, I think we were, you know, oh, crazy word. My wife will tell you we were lucky
yes.
that we were fortunate that we lived in this situation. But in that situation, the job of our daughter's life, the job,
The job.
full-time job
Yes.
was hers. And I didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
If I needed to do it, I would have. I could have. Any parent would. People say that, oh my God, you guys are so strong. You guys, oh, I can't. I was like, what are you talking about? You would do it too if you had to.
Yeah.
You absolutely everyone figures it out, or they do their very best to.
Well, and
And
I'm
that's
just
all
going
we
to say, as witnessing your conversation, there is a sweetness that I just observed happen between the two of you. And that's when she said he would have done it if he had to. The knowing of that between a couple, I think, is a very important knowing, even though the roles were different. I just want to say that to both of you.
Yeah, I listen, I think from our 50,000 foot view, we can say that now. Talk to those two people then.
It
She
was, it
was
would have been
doing it
different.
all, and I was relying on her, and I was being complacent about her being so good at it and not saying, please let me do more because I was like, I don't want to do more because I'm gonna fuck it up. Sorry. Oh my
Oh.
God. You know what I mean? I'm gonna mess it up, and I rely on you. I need you. We need you. That's what it was. In the moment it was, why am I by myself? Why is she alone? How can she do this by her? You know what I mean?
Yes.
It was a hard thing to navigate in real time. Add the stress of a very, very sick daughter and terrified parents and a little brother, or a big
Yeah.
brother who was also
Well,
trying to live life,
maybe we
and
should talk a little bit about Jackson and parenting him during this, because we spoke a little bit about this last time about how you have the older child that still has all the needs, and you want to also meet his needs, and you have two parents that are doing what you just described. So, what would you like to say about that?
I think there was a lot of divide and conquer because, so if we were both home, all four of us were home and something was going on with Adelaide, then I would take care of Adelaide and Miguel was with Jackson and um which was great. And that, Miguel and Jackson developed this incredibly strong bond and that continued after Adelaide died because I would, even though I wasn't taking care of her, I was taking care of my grief, which would I would have days where it was really hard to get out of bed. And, again, had I had to, I could have done it and I would, to take care of Jackson the days that I needed to. But, um, but Miguel was there and he really stepped up on those days and never questioned me and was always there. Um, to continue to care for Jackson when I was debilitated by my grief. I think the other side of that, I remember thinking that, after Adelaide died, that, my child died and he still had his alive.
Oh,
Because we
okay.
had divided and conquered so much during her life. And so that was this whole other piece that, I sort of had to work through and really establish um my own relationship with Jackson separate from Miguel after Adelaide died and really work on that. And it's not that I hadn't had a relationship with Jackson during Adelaide's life. It just looked so different because Adelaide's health and keeping her alive was going to be my first priority. Jackson took the back seat always um, because for Adelaide it was life and death.
Right. So, Miguel, can you want to reflect upon those times as
you know
well?
I always um think of Jackson as like this sort of beacon, right? He's like this buoy. We call him a buoy,
Lighthouse.
the lighthouse that
Lighthouse.
sort of
Sweet.
was a stable, um, you know, presence outside of all of this crazy uh, emotional, storm that was going on a daily basis. Because he didn't care. He was like, give me my little sister, let me give her she's having a seizure. You know what I mean? It was all very
It
uh
was normal for
it was
him.
washed
It was
over
his
as
life.
his
He just had
life,
grown up with this. Yeah.
as just regular life. We actually had a conversation the other day about sleepovers, right? Sleepovers. What are you talking about, Miguel? Well, I'll tell you. Um, Little kids don't have sleepovers until they're older because they're so ingrained in sleeping at home, and we started thinking like our son. we'd ship him off when he was 3 or 4 years old to a friend's house because we're like, hey, daddy's at work and mommy's at the hospital and Adelaide's in the hospital. So he got really used to having this independence and a community raising and a dependence on his own strength and his own mindset, and as much as a 5 or 6 year old can be, and understanding that there was this other energy, there was like this other presence that was part of our life, and he was not always super accepting of it, but he learned to be normalized by the fact that there was this situation, and for him to just exist
Yeah.
as this life that we could hang on to and be like, hey, we can't go under, we can't go down because there is something dragging us forward.
Yes.
We are being dragged forward by his presence and by his life and by his like, yeah, hey, we gotta live, and I think that to his unknowing credit, was something that gave us strength and purpose and the ability to sort of climb out of any sort of dark moment that might come. And he had his own dark moments, and I we always worried that he was super affected. And I mean, I'll never forget going and telling him the day his sister died, the night, it was like in the middle of the night, and I woke him up, and he cried a little bit, and he put his head on my shoulder, and we walked in, and he gave her a kiss, and that was kind of the last time that he ever showed any real kind of emotion. And I was like, oh man, I hope he's not bottling it in. He's 13, he's going to turn 14 this summer. Like he's going to be his body's going through changes and his life's got a girlfriend and, and we can go into other details, but very specifically worried that his sort of internal pain is just bottled up and he doesn't know what to do with it, and he doesn't understand, and he's going to have these difficulties as a grown up or something, and because he doesn't like to show emotion, he doesn't like to. And then so our Tabasco, we've had Tabasco for 15 years, just getting to the end of his life, like earlier this year,
This is
like
your dog.
late.
This is our dog. Yeah.
late I'm
Tabasco.
sorry,
Yeah,
Tabasco
I
was
kind
our
of figured it was a
dog.
dog. Okay. Let's go.
And he had gotten to the end of his life last year, and it was that conversation, it was that time. Kelly's going through breast cancer, and we're having this whole thing, and I was like, okay, I think it's time. And so we told him, and so we had him put down, and then we brought him home. We were gonna have a little box, and I was like, okay, Jackson's gonna see this dog who he grew up with,
Yes.
and let's see what happens,
Like
right?
a brother, right? Or
Like his little brother, his
Yeah.
brother, his big brother.
brother.
And I was like, I don't know, maybe he's going to be like, whatever. And he comes home and Tabasco's in the box, and he says, and he just breaks down crying. And I was like, thank God,
Yes.
thank
Yes.
God, because he's moving through life and understanding his emotions and understanding that's okay, and that his sister, he's able to grieve, he's able to feel, and who knows how much of those tears were Tabasco, maybe some of them were Adelaide, who knows,
Could have
but
been
it
a lot. Yes.
just that it was there and that it existed and that he was going to be okay, and we were all sort of in a good place to be,
Well,
um
and Kelly shared with me that he's a very empathic young man.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and I think that and
many
that and
good
that
qualities.
yeah, more, well, she probably said this already, but he understands life more than many young people, many grown-ups you can talk to. So, for that reason, um another reason why we can look to him and see sort of driving force in our family. I mean, he's 13, so there's that stuff too, but
Yeah. Well,
but
you're just in that. Yes, you're in that.
but in the story of that, you know,
Well, and Kelly shared how he like Adelaide came to school with him, and
yeah, yeah,
he was
yeah.
so proud of his sister. And I think that's a really important part of this journey too, because it sounds like there was such an embracing of your family of Adelaide, but also by him. And that meant there was something that the two of you were doing for him to know that that was okay. Because some people wouldn't handle it in that way. I think you probably both know that.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. I wish I could say that we did it all right or we messed up here and there. I think we did the best we could
Well, in my
with what
experience
we thought, you
with
know.
teenagers, there's probably some stuff he'll tell you about.
Right.
Yes.
He has
You'll
some
learn
notes.
about what that
He
is,
has some
right?
notes for us.
Yeah.
I can't remember if we talked about this before, but I do believe that like I have to be careful and I'm watching him now that like because he was, he got placed on the back burner during Adelaide's life. I see him do like just automatically taking that back seat now in some situations. And so I do feel like we just have to like course correct that a little bit in his life now, where I'm like, no, you can put your needs first sometimes. Like that is you have to make that decision, but you don't have to be the martyr in your, throughout your life. And so I do, I think there, these lessons we have to continue that, that the effects of having a sibling with disabilities, the effects of losing a sibling, like that's going to carry throughout his life. That is ingrained in who he is, but we're going to see the effects, and we have to try and parent that, for the rest of his life.
Yeah. Well, I think I love the word you use the word lessons. The lessons that, that we learn from our journey. But I want to ask you both, oh my goodness, the time is going quickly again. Is what would you each like for people to remember about Adelaide? What would you want people to know about her little life, the complete circle of her little life, although short?
I I want people to know about her, um, but also about people with a variety of disabilities anyway. She was non-mobile and she was nonverbal, but that does not mean that she was incapable of movement or that she was incapable of communication. And um, you know, um, she had every way of letting us know with her body about what she liked and what she didn't like. And she still showed us affection. She showed her brother affection and also, would swat him across the face if he was hugging her too hard. And so just um, never underestimate someone, regardless of what you see as their, traditional abilities, and how we judge what is a traditional ability. That disabilities don't make a person less. And I think that um, Adelaide, even despite all of her disabilities, has moved mountains, and she's certainly impacted the two of us, and everything, and our whole life's goals and missions moving forward. Um, and she just, I don't think anyone ever met her that wasn't touched by her. And I think that, so many parents of children with disabilities or children with medical complexities would tell you the exact same thing.
And I have to say that I've been touched by her by meeting both of you and hearing her story. So, but Miguel, over to you. What would you like
Um, you
about her little life and about her?
know, the people talk about like losing your child, and there's no comparative, right? To me, so well, my this story is like another story, is like someone else. And I think of it like, and I think I've come to think of it like this, where her life was short, and but that was her life, right? That was her life. We would have liked to have her around a lot more, for a lot longer. I think it is tragic how things unfolded. But you know, to say that her life was taken too soon, or her life was I don't I try not to think of it like that. I try to, we have a picture on our wall of Adelaide, and that's who she is, right? That's who she'll stay forever. We will turn old and gray, and we will be the people that we are, until the day we're gone. But that's who she's going to be forever. And there's something kind of really beautiful
Yes.
about that. Was her life. Like, that is the time she was given. We got her for as long as we got her, and to hold that as the space of her life, instead of saying, I wish we could have had more, I wish we could have seeing her grow or whatever. And I think to think of her in those like terms, to say, um, you know, we are glad that we had that time. And to say to anyone who is in this space that look at the moments, think of the moments. Because if I could go back in time and say, hey, really suck this in because you don't know how long. And then we could say that about anybody's life. You can say that about anybody's life, everyone's life. You can say that. But to me and to Kelly, to think of those times when we were so worried, we were so scared, we were so anxious, but say, hey, just live in here for a moment because you never know, you know?
So
So that's it.
embrace those moments.
Yeah.
Well, she certainly has impacted many people's lives, including my own. And I'm going to come back to your book, The Luckiest. And you mentioned, Miguel, being lucky. And please go out and buy the book, The Luckiest. You can get it at every place where books are sold. And what did you find out today? That it's number one? Where is it?
No, it is made the USA Today bestseller list.
Bestseller. Well, that to me isn't number one. Okay.
A bestseller. The
Bestseller.
number one best-selling book in this house
Okay, the number one best, and maybe, and on this program, I'm going to say
on
right
this program.
yes, this program. Well, I just want to again thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming and sharing your life story and Adelaide's life and Jackson's and your wonderful daughter Anessa as well. We didn't talk much about her, but I know that
Next time.
next time we'll have you on again. That's what it's a recovering process, right? Anyway, this, so I just want to, I can't, oh, I have a minute left. So I'm just going to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And to my listeners, you know that I always end to what else is true. I think that we can see here what else is true. And I think that also Miguel reminded me of one of my indigenous friends who said to me that every life is a complete circle, no matter how short or how long. And the beautiful way that you described her life, I think, says it all. So thank you so much. So this is Elaine Miller Karras signing off for Resiliency Within. Until next time.